Hello, and welcome to Black Marriage Therapy, BMT for short. Here we become students of marriage in order to create healthy, long lasting relationships. I'm your host, Junior Smith. In today's episode, we discuss how men can learn the skill of empathy. If you've been enjoying the content, please follow us on Instagram at Black Marriage Therapy. Rate us on your podcast platform and share your favorite episode with a friend. Now, let's get into it. All right. Welcome. This is a man takeover. All right. And we're here joined with a special guest from our very own Facebook group, Mychael Starke. He's here in the building with us now. We started conversing on a Facebook group, and I said, hey, you know what? We could make an episode together. And here we are now. So I'm super excited. Hopefully this is the first of many. So like I said, we're going to talk about empathy and how men can grow in empathy. But before we do all that, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people. Let them get to know you, a little bit about yourself and who you are.
Wow. Yeah. So Mychael Starke, I live in North Carolina. I'm 36 years old. I'm a police officer. I've been doing that for the past 8 years. I've been married for 14 years. I have 2 kids. And, I'm just, trying to every day get closer and closer to God and stay holy and do what I'm called to do. Also, I want to take this time too to, thank God for you and your wife and your beautiful family. Thank y'all for following your calling and your purpose. I think this is great, especially nowadays for men to kind of have this conversation. So I really
Oh,
appreciate it.
thank you. I appreciate that, man. And I appreciate you having this conversation with me because hopefully I want men to listen to this conversation and I want women to listen to it as well. But I'm really excited for the possibility of some guy out there knowing he wants to improve himself, not knowing how to do it, listen to 2 genuine men speak about it and say, okay, well, now I have my action steps. So that's what I'm hoping
Right.
will come out of this conversation. Okay, well, let's get right to it. The purpose of this episode is to discuss growing empathy in a marriage, right? I think as a man, showing empathy is difficult. It's hard. Where we have to learn this skill to show empathy towards our wives or towards our kids. Okay, even thinking outside the family, maybe to extended family or to that coworker. Okay. And so understanding other people's emotions, recognizing the other people's emotions, and then being able to respond to it correctly is a bit of a challenge, I think, for myself, if I'm just speaking for myself. Can you speak a little bit about your growth in empathy, a little bit about your definition of empathy as well?
Yeah. So I think about the same way you think about it. It's more than just, I listened to a podcast that you guys did. I've been listening to them all week at work, to be honest with you. But it was something that you said in one of them, where it's more than just, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, just understanding the emotion behind it. So once we get to that point of being able to understand the underlying emotion, I think that, empathy will come, I want to say more naturally, right? But it'll come, I think, a little bit easier because when you can realize that, you're dealing with more than just a surface level issue and you can dig deeper in yourself to say, hey, okay, let me take a step back and say, how would I feel about this? Then it's easier to kind of locate where that person is coming from. And then you can say, okay, I understand. So let's talk about it and deal with it this way.
Exactly. And I want to ask you this follow-up question because I like what you said. You ended with the word understand. And I feel like in order to show empathy, that's really what you're practicing. You're practicing understanding the other person more. And that means you have to kind of come out of yourself. You have to take yourself out of the equation and you're really focusing on the other person and understanding the feeling that they're trying to express. But that's uncomfortable. That takes vulnerability. That takes, oh, my opinion is not what matters right now. I'm going to set aside myself to go and look at the other person and even try to understand why they would react that way what's the benefit of doing that? Like, what's the benefit of making yourself vulnerable, coming out of yourself? Because if I choose to say, hey, you know what? That response was an incorrect response. According to me, this is how I would have responded. And I'm just going to stick with that. I'm not going to try to understand where you're coming from. That's called a lack of empathy. What kind of damage does that do to a relationship?
Man, that can be, that can do some long lasting damage, because if there's no feeling of understanding between two partners, it's like, well, what ground do we stand on from here?
Mm.
You know, I like to think that, once we start a relationship, we have goals that we may set, and a lot of those goals are going to have to be shared goals, because we're trying to build something together. So, and in that, like you said, it takes being vulnerable, because
Yeah.
you're going to have to sacrifice. So talking about those things and going through those things, it kind of builds you up into the point where you can say, okay, well, maybe I can pull back on this a little bit because it's making my partner stress out too much.
Yeah.
Or, I can push more on this because I know this is going to be beneficial to our growth. I want to say being tough minded, tough headed, strong
Yeah.
minded, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. It doesn't work, because eventually there's going to be something you're going to have to work through together. But, if you're so strong headed, strong minded on an issue, or on your stance on the issue, you're going to end up stonewalling
Mm.
and not want to open up to adjust. And so that's not beneficial for growth at all in any kind of relationship, whether it's a marriage, friendship, parent and child, that's not going to benefit
Mm.
growth. It's not going to produce growth.
So
So we
growth
have to be,
growth comes from you adjusting, not from you staying pigheaded and saying this is what I believe and nothing's going to change me or influence me.
right. You
Mm.
have to adjust to grow.
You have to adjust to grow, but we were taught not to adjust. We're taught the
Yeah.
opposite of that.
Yeah. Yeah. We're taught like, and it's so contradictory.
Yeah.
It's almost like when we're taught growing up, it's like we're taught to be single in relationships, but
Ooh,
you can't have a single minded mindset or a single person mindset in a relationship.
wow.
It won't work.
Okay. Okay. You can't have a single person mindset in a relationship. You dropping bars, man. Okay. Okay. See, this is why I have you here. So that single-minded man who's looking for a marriage should first try to practice having a different mindset, having a teamwork mindset.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I like that. So
Right.
I want to go over empathy a little bit deeper now. And so I gave you the definition. It's the ability to recognize and respond correctly to other people's emotions, right? But the first step of empathy is being able to recognize an emotion in that person, being able to recognize an emotion in my wife, recognize what does fear look like in her, what does stress look like in her, what does she behave like when she's stressed, what does she behave like when she's tired, or what does she behave like when she's different. And I need to be able to recognize, these different feelings, what it looks like or what it sounds like in my wife, in my son, in my daughter, in my family. So my question to you is, how can we get better at being able to understand the different reactions or different emotions from our partner? Because that's the first step, recognizing the emotion and then knowing how to respond to it correctly.
Oh, so I think we start with communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it I don't want to seem stereotypical, but a lot of female communication is going to be, verbal.
Yeah.
So we pick that up, and that'll go play directly into our listening skills.
Yes.
So are you really listening
Come
to
on.
understand,
Come
or
on.
are
Say
you
it.
listening just to respond, right?
Yes.
Just to have a clap back. So that comes into, that comes to play like majorly in a major way, because that's going to give you all the cues that you need. It's like I said, how do I know when she's stressed? How do I know if she had a long day at work if she don't come home and say that? I can look for, now we have the visual cues, right? Now
Okay.
we're listening with our eyes, so to speak, right? I know that's kind of weird, but yeah, you have to listen with your eyes, you know, because how are you not going to pick it up? So if she comes home from work and the first thing that she does is maybe, lays down or sits on the couch, then I can probably pick up without her saying anything, oh, she had a long day or a
Hmm.
stressful day or something, right? Okay, what can I do to
Uh-huh.
take the stress off of her in this moment? Whether it's, taking the kids. I remember it was an episode that you guys did, and you said you can take the kids for a walk, just to give your wife a break, right? Stuff like that. Or I can cook dinner tonight. I
Yeah.
got it. You sit down, relax.
Yeah. Yes,
Anything. I can
sir.
vacuum the floor. I can wash the dishes or whatever needs to be done. If I can see that you've had a long, hard day, let me take the stress off of you, right? And so that opens up the relationship to flourish in many different ways, and it opens up more channels of communication because
Yes,
now it's
sir.
like I know that you see me,
Yes.
and
Yes.
everybody wants to be seen, right? So
Yes. Even men. Let me say this. I know we're talking about men showing empathy to women. Even men want to feel seen. They want to
mhm,
feel like you get me. That's a human longing, a human desire. Is that we feel seen and we feel connected. Are you actually listening? Are you paying attention? First step to showing
yeah,
empathy is be curious and pay attention, right? Recognize. How do you recognize? With your eyes. You're looking at the situation. You're looking at your wife's response. Oh, wow, she's been short with me and she's been short with the kids.
mhm,
Oh, she's been snapping. Oh, she got a lot on her plate. I can see it. Look at her schedule. She's been ripping and running. You know what I mean? And so I think, like you said, the more you pay attention to your spouse, the more you'll be able to recognize the different emotions, right?
yeah,
And then the more you pay attention to those different emotions, the more you'll know the right response. But you don't get
that's it,
one without the other. It's the
right?
same. It builds on top of each other. Oh, I don't know how to pick the right response, so I'm not even gonna try. Hey, man, you gotta try first. You may get the
You
wrong
got to do something.
response. You gotta do
Yeah,
something, right? Trial and error. Let me give you an example of the wrong response. So I know my wife, and I know this now. Okay, when she has big emotions, raw emotions that she hasn't processed yet, she needs to go process it by herself. And so me inserting myself, hey, babe, what can I do? Talk to me. Come here. Sit down with me. That's a sign of disrespect to my wife. Did I know that when I married her? No. But I know now, hey, I need to let her go process this, right? When I recognize in her, oh, she's having a big emotion. I can see it. Oh, babe, do you need some time alone? Yes, babe. Okay, boom. I recognize the emotion and I respond the correct way, but that takes time. It
mhm,
comes through time. And so I don't want anybody listening to be discouraged. Like, I don't know how to recognize certain emotions, or I don't know how to respond correctly. It takes effort on your behalf to keep trying, to keep paying attention, to keep listening with your eyes, like you said,
yes,
dropping bars in this episode. I appreciate that. And I have some more examples. So another example of a reaction may be, my wife is going through something and she wants to process this with me, okay? But she may want to process it with you. She may want you to sit there and be quiet while she processes it out loud. So let me vent. Don't solve the problem, right? I need you to be a listening ear, right? Or sometimes she may say, hey, I need you to tell me it's going to be better. I need you to affirm me. Let me know it's going to be better, right? Or here's my favorite one. And I've learned all of this over the years. My favorite one is feel what I feel. You come home,
yeah,
she come home, yo, this person, da 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 da, this and this and that. Can you believe that? You don't have to fake it now. I mean, if you're genuinely concerned, and usually my wife, she is very based in reality. So if she feels upset, 9 times out of 10, she's right. She's not like over exaggerating. So she's like, feel what I feel now. She'll continue until she sees the frustration that she has reflected in me, right?
right.
So until she sees me get frustrated, she doesn't want me to go down the street and slap somebody, but I show some concern. I feel what she feels. She feels like she's human. She feels like she's not crazy, right? She feels seen and heard, right? And
Mhm.
so I just listed a lot of different reactions to a certain emotion, but it takes time to be able to recognize the emotion, and it takes time to learn the correct response.
you have to extend yourself grace, because it's not going to be, you're not going to see it initially. It takes time to grow. So extend yourself grace and keep going. One foot in front of the other, one day at a time.
Yeah, I like that. I like the fact that you said you won't see it right away. You may even feel silly. The first time, hey, the first time you get outside of yourself. Okay, let me give you an example. My wife says she's feeling overwhelmed, right? And you know why it's difficult to show empathy? Because I look at her schedule and that's not an overwhelming schedule to me. I'm sorry. You feel overwhelmed. I'm looking at your schedule. You shouldn't feel overwhelmed, because to me, that's not being overwhelmed. That's what you're doing. I have twice as many meetings as you do, right? But empathy is not asking for you to validate if somebody's emotion is right or wrong. And it's not asking you to just agree with the person. It's asking you to try to understand their reaction to a certain situation. And so me looking at her schedule, I'm looking at her and I'm saying, if I'm trying to understand her reaction to a situation, she says she's overwhelmed. I wouldn't be overwhelmed, but let me try to look at her. She's being short, like we said. Okay, she has a lot on her plate. It is, I mean, she does have a lot of stuff going on the schedule. She's being short and she looks exhausted. You know what? She's overwhelmed. And it doesn't matter what I think overwhelming looks like. She's overwhelmed. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to respond in a certain way. But the first time you do that, it's hard. It's difficult. It's strange even to get outside of yourself. You want to stop at, you shouldn't be overwhelmed. If I can be honest, I want to stop at, let me see your schedule. Yeah, no, dismiss, right? And so it's hard to strike that balance between don't dismiss everything, because that's not how you would react. And then there's also a balance of don't just agree to everything. Like, people make the mistake when it comes to empathy, right? If I listen to you, okay, and if I validate your emotion, that means I'm agreeing with you. That means now that I'm listening to you and I'm agreeing that you are overwhelmed, now I have to change my definition of what being overwhelmed looks like. And I have to change my definition of what hard work looks like. Now I have to make it look like yours. That's not true. We have to strike that balance between not just agreeing with the person, but at the same time, not trying to dismiss the person because we wouldn't respond in that way, right? And it's difficult to strike that balance, right? But I think the more if we're really paying attention, the more we practice really paying attention, I think the easier it gets to strike that balance, right? Because we're really taking ourselves outside of ourselves. We're practicing more and more and more, recognizing the emotion in the person, understanding why they would react like that, understand why they would react like that. That doesn't mean agree with the way they reacted. Understand their response to a situation, right? Understand it by looking around, look at the context clues, like you said, by listening with your eyes, right? And then being able to respond in that correct way. But yeah, like you said, it's weird the first time you do it.
First time is strange, because like you said, it's like you're stepping out of yourself, and so you have to step out of yourself to really truly understand, or try to understand where somebody else is coming from.
You're not safe when you step outside of yourself. You're not safe.
Exactly. Yeah, because now you're vulnerable, right? You're opening yourself up to something that could affect you long term.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah, for sure. I think the first couple of times you do it, it feels wrong, as a matter of fact. Let me go ahead and say that. The first couple of times you do it, it's like, I should never do this again. But you know what? You used the perfect word. You said you're opening yourself up, but you are opening yourself up. But what you don't understand is you're opening yourself up to receive something good. It just feels wrong in the moment. And when I stonewall, it feels good in the moment, but it's wrong in the long term. It feels good now. In the end, won the battle, lost the war. Right?
Right.
It's the exact opposite with empathy. You open up, I lost the battle. But what ends up happening is it's not about a battle. It's not about a war. After a while, your team, you're on the same field.
Yeah.
Same
side by side.
Side by side, side by side. Okay, so another question I have for you here is, when it comes to showing empathy, we're trying to listen for the emotion, right? So your son, your daughter, your wife, whoever you're talking to, whoever you're trying to build empathy with, you're practicing that listening skill, like you said, actively listening. You're not distracted. You're not trying to solve the problem. You're not trying to clap back. You're just listening to hear the emotion, right? To get the feeling, and then you want to respond correctly. So my question to you is, how do you know when you're not showing empathy to your wife, to your kids? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm. I think it can mostly, I know for me myself, it looks like stonewalling for me.
Mm.
So, and this is just a term that I learned, was it last year, I think, or 2021? I just learned about stonewalling.
Explain it to
And it's
us.
funny because it's like, I wish I could remember how the counselor said it, but the way it would come about with me would be, we could have a conversation about something, about whatever the issue is, and I just stay stuck in my place of this is what I think, this is what I want, and I'm not budging. You know,
Mm.
you can even make some really good points, but if I'm stonewalling you, nah, I'm not hearing it.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing it, dog. So it's like, don't even talk to me because this is what I want. So that's how it looked for me.
Okay.
And I think, that can what it does, it hinders the relationship, whether between your wife or your kids, because our kids too are experiencing all these emotions, especially as they get old, and things change so quick for them.
Yes.
So you have to recognize in them, okay, you're not the same. Like I have two daughters, right? So my 9-year-old is not the same as she was when she was 7, and my 3-year-old is definitely not the same when she was 1, right? So she's a lot more assertive now. So I have
Mm.
to recognize and be able to see and listen and pick up on the cues of what they're putting down, right? And so I get stonewalled by family because I have to be open because they're watching me. The kids are watching me picking up my cues, right? My wife is also watching me picking up my cues. So I need to be able to be open to my family and show that empathy so that we can, keep this thing moving.
A man working as a team with his spouse, there's nothing you guys can't do. Raise your
Yeah.
kids, start a business, whatever, have a great relationship. There's nothing you can't accomplish, right? But like you said, you have to be listening and paying attention. And you mentioned kids, and I'm a girl dad as well, 2 girls. And I think it was difficult for me to show empathy to my first daughter, firstborn. First of all, it was a first experience, right? First time experience. As a matter of fact, I never like babysat or anything like that. Like I probably changed like one diaper before my daughter. Like I was not prepared. I think one thing that helped me learn empathy towards my kids is research, education, and understanding their development, right? We talked about empathy as understanding more about the other person. My wife and I got this tool that showed like all the developmental stages in a kid's life. And the particular stage she was at, she was experiencing big emotions. She was learning big emotions at 2 years old. And they're gonna have a lot of fights because they have these big emotions. And so now I'm prepared because I educated myself. It was a lot
Mm-hmm.
easier to show empathy towards her. So anybody who's struggling with showing empathy to your kids, or take this back to any relationship, I think gaining an education, gaining a better understanding will help you show empathy to that person. So I do want to talk about work real quick because I feel like it impacts everything. Even as a
Yes.
man, I think, just being able to provide and work is so important to me. At the same time, my work really impacts what I do at home, how I behave, how I show up to my family. So how do external stresses like your job, maybe even the kids, right? Like we were talking about the kids before, finances and stuff like that. How does that impact you? You mentioned you're a police officer, and that's like totally different. I mean, yes and no. You know what? I won't even speak on it. I won't even speak on it. I'll let you speak about it. How does work and stuff like that impact how you present and even your levels of empathy to your family?
So yeah, so for me, it can be crazy because my job, we go from house to house a lot of times, dealing with people and their emotions and what they're going through, trying to solve their problems in a way that they can take something from it and maybe not have the same issue in the future.
Mm.
So when you're dealing with that, like and not only just like small calls like domestic calls, but we have like the huge mental health calls where somebody wants to climb up a cell tower and shut down a city block for 6 hours, right? So we deal with that stuff. People who are suicidal, And so you're dealing with all this stuff, and it's hard to not internalize because we're
Mm.
all people,
Yes.
right? And we can all experience the exact same emotions that they are at any given point in time. So for me, coming home after dealing with all that stuff, I really have to, like, I think for me, it's like the process of taking a uniform off. As I'm taking my uniform off, I'm taking off the day,
Mm.
right? So I take off my shirt, there goes that first call for service. I take off my vest, there goes that second call for service. Take off my pants, my boots, everything like that. And so I have to look at that as almost a ritual
Mm.
to kind of get into, okay, I'm not at work anymore, right? Now I'm home. And this, although home is work, it's a different kind of work. And this is the work that's not saying that my work is not important, but this is the work that's more important because, can't bring the outside into the inside. They
Mm.
taught us in training, leave work at work and leave home at home when you come to work. You know,
Mm.
you have to be able to separate. And it's hard, it's hard because this stuff, a lot of the stuff that, again, speaking for myself, because I'm a police officer, a lot of the stuff that I deal with, it's heavy. It's very heavy. And, so it takes almost a level of, you have to know who you are internally. You have to have that inner compass. Like that, I pray every day. I'm in the word every day. Have to have it because that leads me just right down that straight and narrow path. And so I know my baseline. And I know when I'm getting off my baseline, and I know what to do to get back on my baseline.
Wow.
So yeah, it's tough, man. But being able to, just take the layers off and then step into my new layer when I'm home, that that shows up big for me. That's how I get through.
Wow. Hey man, that's amazing. That's amazing and it's
Yeah,
relatable. I love the fact that you said you have to have your identity. That's the source of you being able to do this because you have a baseline. You know how you want to present yourself. You know how you want to be. And I think that's the first thing a man or a person has to do when they want to grow. They say, "Hey, I know the man I want to be.
right.
I know the police officer I want to be. So when I'm not behaving that way, I can alter myself. I know the husband I want to be. I know the father I want to be. So when I come home and I'm yelling at the kids, I know I'm off base.
Yep.
I'm
Way
off
off base.
base. I'm way off base. Oh, wait, I don't want to be yelling. My
Yeah.
dad did that. I told myself I'll be better. But because you've made a decision, a choice, you've set boundaries, even for yourself, right? You have begin to call your own fouls. Oh man, you know what, babe? I apologize. I shouldn't have reacted that way. Why? Because you know who you want to be. You've already made that decision. No one had to tell you be a good dad or hey, be a respectable husband. You've already made that choice for yourself. And because you have that choice, you have that standard for yourself, you're able to present in the way that you want to. Do we get off base sometimes? Of course, we're human, like you said.
Right.
But because we still have that standard for ourselves, we can come back on track. I think deep down inside, we probably know it's not the best idea to bottle everything up. It's not the best idea to stonewall somebody and not listen to what they have to say. It's not the best idea to remain to ourselves. But for me, it was the safest choice. It was the safest
It's
choice.
easier too.
It's easier. It's the
Yeah.
safest choice. It's easier. And guess what? If I do it long enough, maybe my wife will just get in line. I think the change for me happened with the impact I was having on my wife and the impact that
Mhm.
I already knew was going on within myself. My big turning point was already feeling something there in my heart, like, that I wasn't being fully authentic or fully myself in a relationship. And then also the impact it was having on my wife. She is a person who speaks her mind. And so she would let me know what I was doing. She wouldn't let me get away with it. Um, and I think marriage does that. It kind of brings a mirror in front of your face. And
Yeah.
the imprint that you leave on your wife, on your kids, that's you. And you have to come
Yeah.
into you have to come into you have to face that. You
Most
have to
definitely.
face that. What was your changing point? What made you make the decision to learn these skills of teamwork and empathy and things like that?
So I think, well, I know for sure, I've always wanted, desired marriage. right? And so I saw growing up, I saw my mom, like I said, she was a single mom. So, and I saw her kind of bounce, honestly, between relationships and stuff like that. And I just knew that's not what I wanted.
Mm.
Uh, so I kind of got to the point where, and then my dad, he ended up remarrying. They'll be celebrating 30 years in 2025. So he ended up remarrying, and I saw his relationship with my stepmom. And in the beginning, it wasn't great. All right. So it's like I'm seeing my mom and her singleness and what she's doing. I know I don't want to do that. I'm seeing my dad and his new marriage and what's going on with that. And I know I don't want to do that either.
Mm.
So I kind of had to take into account, like, okay, well, what is it about, or what do I think marriage is and what it should be? And how can I tailor myself to kind of get prepared for it?
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, going into it, we got married. My wife and I got married in 2009.
Okay.
So going into it, man, I still had no clue. I was still fumbling in the dark trying to find the light switch and just couldn't do it. So, and there was a lot of learning through the process, and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't and things like that. But, I think for me it was when we decided to get married, it was like, okay, I understand, she has a background, a history, where she comes from and what she's been through. So knowing that, I had to say, okay, let me try to understand, even though I know for me, it was completely different. My background, my history is completely different,
Mm.
so I'm like, well, how can I understand where she's coming from on certain issues if I don't know, if I don't try to understand her? And so that's been, I don't want to say a struggle because
Yeah.
it's not
Oh
been a
yeah.
struggle,
Yeah.
right? But it's been a learning point for like the whole time we've been married, and it's just always trying to learn something new every day.
Mm.
I honestly just started reading books about relationships like last year. I think this should have happened like a long time ago,
For
but I
real.
just started reading books about relationships last year. And so trying to take tips and stuff, from the books that I'm reading and from other people with podcasts like this, and just trying to learn so I can really understand um, empathy and the role that it plays in a marriage, because it's huge. It plays a huge role in the
Yes.
marriage because you have to, like you said, you have to be vulnerable. You have to adjust so that we can grow.
Yeah, no, you're right, man. Yo, I appreciate you sharing your backstory. It seems like you had already made up your mind, like to do things differently. You were willing. When you got married, you said, "Okay, I need to learn and understand my wife," and then you did the research. Like you went
Mhm.
out and found research and found information so you can educate yourself. So,
Right.
so we're talking about learning. So, talk to us. All right. Talk to that young man who's saying to themselves, or they don't have to be young. All right. I take that back. Talk to that gentleman who's saying, I want to be empathetic. I want to have a great family with loving kids and a wife that loves me and I love her and she feels safe with me, but I just don't believe I can do it. I just don't know how. Like I can't even dream that far because I look at myself and I'm inadequate. I have a lot of fear. I have a lot of insecurity, or I just don't feel like I can accomplish that what you guys are talking about here. What tips can you give that person to help them on their way?
But first, I think it starts with just that, just being honest with yourself. You know, if you know where you are, you can locate yourself where you are in this moment or in whatever season you're in your life. As long as you're honest about it, and you know what you want to have in the future, then you can start setting, rope or stepping stones for yourself to get to where you want to be. I think also, you know, having resources available to you, whether they're books. I started reading books, like I said, last year, and I've just been going on a tear. So I don't want to plug anybody, but I've had like
Yeah, go
there's an author.
ahead.
His name is Willard Harley. I have maybe 4 or 5 books of his.
Mm.
His books are amazing. I'm telling you. He talks a lot about, stuff like this, like empathy and relationships. And it's also Were his based on faith? I can't remember if his was based on faith or not, but I think they were. And so it talks a lot about that, And so all of these things, books, podcasts, even people that like people that you can go to sit down and say, okay, in that particular season of your life, how did you guys get through it? I think those types of relationships with people who are married and have been married for several years and have experienced the ups and downs of marriage, their tips and tricks to success are, I think, would be great because you're getting it from a person that you
Yes.
know, even though the books and the podcasts are, they're great. I think, having that firsthand experience with somebody that it hits home more because you know them, right? It's like, I know you're not just blowing smoke,
Yeah.
because I remember when y'all were going through that, and I remember when y'all came out of that, so I can learn what you did in the meantime, in between time, to get to where you are now. So
Mm,
yeah, there's a
okay.
lot of resources out here for young men or a little bit older guys, that's kind of trying to settle down, in the last years or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of resources that's on hand and available, easy to access. Like I have a niece, she's 17. Like I told her, it's 2023. There's no reason for nobody to know any of this stuff anymore because it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
So
Yes, you could definitely educate yourself. Yes, 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 yes. I agree with that. Okay, man. Awesome. Well, listen, this has been an amazing conversation. I was counting all the gems you dropped, but then you just kept dropping them too fast. So, I mean, it's full of gems from you, bro. I appreciate. I'm gonna remember listening with your eyes. I'm gonna say that as
yeah.
well. So just know if you hear me say it, I'll give you credit too. I'm like Mychael Starke told me to listen with my eyes. But no, amazing conversation. I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to be with us from our own Facebook group. Hopefully, like I said, this is
Yes.
one of many. If this encourages anybody listening from the group to join us, listen, join us, man. This all started from a conversation that we had in the Facebook group. And if you're not a part of the Facebook group, you should join today. All right, folks,
And
that's
I
the end
will
of this.
say
Yeah.
real quick, I will say, because this almost didn't happen. Because you did send me a message and I didn't see it from my phone. And so I was like, what did you talk about? Send me a message. So I had to pull it up on my laptop and go to like actual Facebook and see that you
Oh,
sent me a message. So this almost didn't happen.
what?
I'm grateful that it did, though. I'm grateful that it did.
Yes, man. I didn't want to do it by myself. I did not. I was gonna do it by myself, and trust me, it wasn't gonna be half as good as this episode was because it wouldn't have you in it. So thank you.
Wow.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode. And remember, all the information we talked about will be in the show notes for you guys to go through. All right, guys. Talk to you guys later. Peace.